Here's my 931, my 924 turbo. I'm going to try to start this car pretty soon. As you can clearly see, this car isn't running. It hasn't been running since many years, who knows, probably more than 20. So judging by the plug leads I pulled off of it, it could be even the late 80s or early 90s that this car has been sitting. So with such cars, it's impossible to start them, on old fuel injection, because it's probably all gummed up, and it just requires a complete teardown and professional rebuild, which it's costly, but that's not the only thing or the only problem. The problem is there's very few people or shops that can do that for you, right? To rebuild the metering head, the warm-up regulator, and to calibrate all these according to factory spec. There's fewer and fewer people that still do this, and of course it's expensive. So as an alternative, with some benefit, this EFI kit that I'm working on can help you revive such cars, or if yours runs but doesn't really run well, it's still a good option. But the idea is that you can start with even such a car and get it running very quick. Let's try to have a general view at the system. So obviously you got your ECU, which you mount right here in the place of the where you had the ignition amplifier. Then its wiring harness moves up and reaches the place where the ignition coil was. That's where the disjunction is, and from that junction, the harness splits into multiple branches that go to the injectors and to the coil as an output, and as inputs the branches go to the throttle position sensor, to the intake air temperature sensor, to the coolant temperature sensor, which is mounted on this housing at the back of the head. Mine is not bolted on yet, but as well the engine or crank position and speed sensor. So yeah, this is the electronic part, more or less. So the ECU harness goes there, then it branches into all the required things. It has let's say a power part, the system. There's this relay that you have to bolt here like that, and then there's this connector. So late cars have the square one, early cars have the round connector. So you just connect this to your car, and then the power part, let's say the powering part, has one wire that goes to the battery, and that's about it. So you have to connect all the sensors, that connector, and plus to the battery, and of course the ground, and that's it for the electric bit. Now like I said, the crank sensor and crank trigger wheel are down here. The throttle position sensors on the throttle. The coolant temperature sensor is on this housing at the back of the head. It's a bit more difficult to get. The intake air temperature is in the place of the 50 injector. And yeah, that's about it with the sensors. Now, with the injection part of the system, you get your fuel rail, or so-called fuel block, which replaces the metering head on your Cageatronic. It just bolts on, and yeah, you get the fuel lines, and of course the modern injectors. The modern injectors have lower bung, which you have to replace in the head, in the cylinder head. Normally they are plastic bits. You have to take them out and put the new injectors in. Then there's a head, and then there's a strap that keeps everything in one place. Yeah, so mainly this is it. You get your fuel side of the system, which replaces the Cageatronic. You get your electronic side and the sensors, and of course you get the coil pack, which replaces the distributor and is mounted in place of the distributor via a stem or something that I designed. Yeah, so this is pretty much it. I started, and I would start by pre-assembling the trigger wheel to the crank pulley, pre-assembling the throttle body with a sensor and adapter, and pre-assembling the coil pack to the adapter and the stem. Then I would do the coolant temperature sensor replacement and put it back onto the engine, and then I'd do the injectors, the fuel block, and in the end I'd put the ECU and the harness and connect everything and start. When preparing the trigger wheel on the crank pulley, it's very important that you orient the missing tooth correctly. The pulley has a notch, right, which shows you TDC when the engine timing is at marks. So this is matching the original mark from the crank pulley. So what you need to do is install the trigger wheel exactly on the opposite. So you can install it 4 different ways, obviously, but you just have to make sure that it's pointing the other way, and that's it. The crank sensor bracket goes on to the oil pump housing using these 2 bolts, right? So right above the belt or the crank pulley, there's these 2 bolts, and you take them out, you put the bracket in, and you put the bolts in. When installing the crank pulley, or prior to installing the crank pulley, make sure that the missing tooth is opposite of the mark, the TDC mark. And when installing this, mind the one-way fit hole, which the crank has like a bolt or sticking out, and you need to find that bolt with this hole. So before fitting the pulley, it's a good idea to clean the shaft a little bit so that it goes in easily. And you'll notice that that locating pin versus the hole has some play, right? Normally you should find the middle, but ideally what you should do is you put the engine at the signs and match that sign there, right, with the oil pump housing sign, and yeah, match the cam, that notch and that sign, they have to match at TDC, and then you can tighten the crank pulley. So I start by doing the timing belt on this, because the old one was really crispy and crunchy, and no reason at all to even start or try to start a 924 turbo engine with an old belt. So I did the timing belt on that. While I was there, I changed the crank pulley to the one in the kit. This one also comes with a trigger wheel and a trigger sensor, which I will mount in a bit. And then I just removed the old fuel lines all the way through the warm-up regulator with the injectors as well, because we're going to replace them with the new ones. We're going to replace them with a new fuel block, as well as new injectors. That's what you have to look at when you're done with the sensor installation. The coolant temperature sensor needs to be installed in the place of the old coolant temperature and the old thermo switch, actually. So on this unit here, there's a temperature sensor which feeds information to the dash, and there's a thermo switch which is used for the original injection. So you have to remove this housing from the back of the head of the engine. It's not exactly a walk in the park, but there's just enough space here to undo these 6mm bolts right here and slightly below. So there's just enough space to fit a 10mm socket and a ratchet here. So it's easy to take off. The air temperature sensor with its adapter goes instead or in the place of the 5th injector, right there. So this is the unit that you want to take out. The front bolt or the upper bolt is easier, the lower one is more difficult to get out. And yeah, if you think this is difficult, you have to put this back. So the goal is to replace this thermo switch with the temperature sensor from the kit and put this back. You're going to use some liquid seal on this surface in order to be able to install this with the head in the car. When replacing the thermo time switch with the temperature sensor in this housing from the back of the cylinder head, make sure you clean these threads, because the thermal switch only has like 2 or 3 threads, and this one has a bit more, and you might not be able to bolt it or turn it all the way down and make a proper seal. So pay attention to this. Before installing this, make sure that the connector is turned in such a way that this this feature, right, this locating feature, is pointing away from the mating surface. The reason is the connector will go on it, and if it's the other way around, it will be a really tight squeeze to fit, right? Or if this is like 45 degree or 90 degree from ideal, you're gonna have a fun time trying to fit this connector. So this is rotatable, right? After it's tight, you can slightly turn it like so. For the throttle positioning sensor, I'll do a separate, more in-depth video, because there's obviously different throttle bodies for different 924. So the NA throttle body you can't use, you have to upgrade to the Audi V8 or some or five cylinder throttle body that has a long enough shaft and some of these features that you can install the adapter to. And the 924 Turbo S1 is a similar situation. You have to upgrade to that throttle body, to the Audi one. And the 924 Turbo S2 has this throttle body, which I make a direct adapter for. But the basic idea is you have to take your throttle body out. You have to, depending on the variety or the differences between the throttle body that you find, you might have to trim the shaft a couple of millimeters, and basically you just bolt on some adapter plate and use some spacers to bolt the, or to mount the throttle positioning sensor to the throttle body and connect it to the shaft. Yeah. This arm, you can leave it in. It won't, I don't know, won't be bad, but of course it takes away some of the flow area. So you could remove it if you want to remove it. There's some safety clips here, and probably you have to disassemble the whole thing and take the shaft out and so on. Alright, so once the fuel lines are off, you have to remove the injectors and then these injector bungs. I removed 3 of them, but I must have done something really bad in my life, because I'm punished, and this is just spinning. You know, there's like a brass nut and it's spinning into the plastic, and I need to figure out a way how to get it out. Yeah, I hope you get better luck. Anyway, the engine harness, the original engine harness, you just have to remove it all. You know, I haven't disconnected it from the coolant temperature sensor yet, but I will when I take the distributor off. So the complete engine harness comes off, and it will be replaced with a new one, which will just plug in here, and you connect to the battery with one wire, and that's it. All right, more. So with the fuel distributor, you need to remove this head, you know, of the housing, and you also need to remove this stopper and the whole plate, right? So 2 very important things for these 3. they are very tight. Use a brand new or a proper screwdriver. Don't mess around with smaller ones. Use the right one. You will have to push all your weight onto these bolts and carefully unscrew them. If you mess them up, you're gonna have to take the whole thing out and drill them, or maybe drill them here. But it's really messy if you don't get this right. So I've messed it up on the NA, and I had to take the whole thing out and take it to a machine shop so that they mill these off. But I learned, and I use the right screwdriver for them, and for the 931, easy. Another thing, when undoing these and these, don't drop stuff into the turbo. All right, easy as that. And even if you're sure you didn't drop anything into the turbo, after you're done, put a magnet through there and check. You don't want anything into the turbo, obviously. If you're having trouble removing these, like me, so 3 of them went very easily, but the 4th one just spins. The brass bushing spins into the plastic bushing. So what I did was put a 10mm wrench in between the old injector and the brass bushing, tighten it, and use something to pry it up like so. So it slowly lifts up, and you can just squeeze it up. You will of course destroy the injector and the bushing, but you don't care because you have the new EFI system installed soon. So it's out. Clean these things properly, really properly. If you can, get one of these thread makers and carefully run this through. I did this on the other ones, and I'm gonna do this on this one too. But be very careful not to cross the threads. You can, very easily destroy your head. If you don't have something like this, just take a sharp 90-degree tool and just put something there so the dirt and the stuff doesn't fall in, and just run each thread individually with a sharp tool. When you run the threads, put some tape there, otherwise all the stuff falls in, and of course you don't want all that stuff into the engine. Once every few turns, just vacuum clean that stuff. Don't let it pile up, because chances are higher that it will pass through and fall into the engine. So these have to go by hand very easily down. If they don't, they get stuck, you either got the thread wrong or you haven't cleaned it all the way through. So they have to be nearly flush to the head. So just a little bit. When installing the heads of the injectors, don't forget the O-rings that go between the straps, injector straps, and the injector heads. These O-rings are designed to take out any tolerances in the casting or in the threads, that how well the injector sits higher, lower, at a slight angle. So these brackets, of course, are CNC bent, and they will always be the same. But your manifold casting may be different. The threads that you cleaned might be a little bit lower or higher. so a few tenths of a millimeter or something like that, and those O-rings are there to take that into account and get always a flush sitting of the head on the injector. When tightening these nuts, firmly press down and hold these so that the O-rings are slightly compressed. Also make sure that these are and stay centered with the injector. So when you look from the top, you'll want to see a fairly even gap all around. If you see something like this, right, bigger gap in one side, then you should probably try to readjust this so that it sits symmetrically. You route your harness starting from the ECU, like so, and then you place the junction here or around here, and then you have these two old mounts that used to mount the coil, the ignition coil. One you use for the ground strap, and one you use to secure the relay of the whole harness. Before connecting the coil connector, check the safety, that the safety is, the purple thing is pushed all the way in, and you can then connect it, otherwise it won't go in. So what do you do with the old ignition module or ignition amplifier in case of the NA? Well, it's up to you, I guess. You could cut it and isolate it, somewhere there, or you could just wrap it up and store it there somehow. There's a few details and particularities from model to model. For example, the 924 Turbo has this overboost switch, and actually the fuel pump relay will take ground through this, right? And for example, if you are going overboost, this will kill the fuel pump by removing the ground to the fuel pump relay. Another particularity is that the late cars have the square connector, and the early ones have the round. So there, you just have to look into the details, and we can talk about those. But basically, through this connector, you have the coolant and the oil pressure wires, which are also in the original harness, and you have the switched power that switches the whole EFI system on. And your car, these are old cars, they might have the wires here switched. I don't know, I've seen some cars, some people switched for some reason the wires, and some cars have had work on them, and there's wires bypassed. So of course the system can't account for that, so you really have to be careful, and we have to be keeping contact about what's going on there to make sure that everything is connected properly. Details about how to assemble this, that, and other subsystems. I'll probably make a drawing or assembly drawing, schematic of some sort, and you can always consult that to see what goes where. Before you start, of course, double check the fuel connections, that they are tight, double check your injector assembly, check if you have fuel pump running and putting fuel into the system. Double check your electrical connections, and yeah, that's about it. You are ready to for the first start. So it's alive.